You know, I sent out a Facebook the other day and asked for your favorite 5 pictures from the 50s, also stating that the 50s wasn't a spectacular or a great decade. Wow, after revisiting the 50s, I could not have been more wrong. All About Eve remains my favorite of the 50s. You know, Bette Davis, Marilyn Monroe in her first feature role, Hugh Marlowe, great role with Hugh Marlowe, who was a great fabric type of actor. Celeste Holmes, Gary Merrill, who eventually married Bette Davis. Great, great film. If you haven't seen it, must see. Also in the 50s, I'm going to go through some of these. The very first of the great angry and confused teenagers. Rebel Without a Cause, James Dean. James Dean was great. He starred in 3 films, none of which had even come out prior to his death. He never saw one of his films that he starred in released in the theater. Died in a traffic accident in his Porsche 908, I believe, going up Pacific Coast Highway. Tragic loss. Paul Newman took a lot of his roles over the years. Rebel Without a Cause. Natalie Wood was just blossoming as a young girl. We had seen Natalie Wood as a child actress in so many films. Miracle on 34th Street, probably the best example of that. She now was a 16-year-old teenage girl blossoming in her sexuality. She actually had she had an affair with the director. I'm not going to mention his name. During this film, she was 16. But Natalie Wood was wonderful as the girl next door. The girl next door who was considered moving and not being next door anymore. Some Like It Hot. In woke Hollywood, Some Like It Hot does not. It just doesn't stand up in woke Hollywood. It's a drag, and it's all men dressing as women, all the things that go with it. But it's been voted the best comedy time and time again over the decade since it was made. I'm seeing it's been voted the best comedy of all time. I'm actually going to put it in there as one of my top films of the 50s. Maybe the best musical ever, certainly in the top 3, 4, 5. From you can mention it to anybody, but a lot of people really think the best musical of all time. This bar was set very high. By Singing in the Rain, Gene Kelly, who starred in it, co-directed it. Debbie Reynolds was 19. She was the current Miss Burbank. She went to Burbank High School, where the studio was. Was unbelievable in standing up to those actors. Singing in the Rain, one of the great musicals of all time, make my top list of the 50s. The Searchers. Harry Carey Jr. was a staple of John Ford's stable of actors that would be in all of his westerns. Woody Strode, there's just so many of them that are sitting there. Great film. The Searchers. I was privileged to watch a screening of The Searchers with Harry Carey Jr. Unbelievably, and then got to talk to him, interview him after the screening. One of my favorite days ever. The Searchers, one of the best westerns ever, maybe the best western ever. And it really was one of the early films that taught us about racial hate, segregation, and hate. And it wasn't a black-white thing. It was John Wayne basically hating the Indians and having great uh, great hatred for that. And we learned a lot in that film. Over the years, I learned a lot about hatred, racial relations, anti-Semitic things from movies, films of the 50s and early 60s, and myself. So we're sitting there with The Searchers, Some Like It Hot, Rebel Without a Cause, All About Eve. Now here are some of the films that didn't make my list. Okay, all of these could have made the list. Hitchcock in the 50s made To Catch a Thief, Rear Window, North by Northwest, Vertical, all of which could be on this list. Okay, listen to those. To Catch a Thief, Rear Window, North by Northwest, Vertical. You should see all of those. You should see all of these films. Also in the 50s, we get High Mark sitting on my honorable mention. 12 Angry Men, High Noon, The African Queen. Lots of seen that. I mean, I was such a feel-good, World War II setting in Africa. Humphrey Bogart, Katharine Hepburn, one of the great films ever made. On the Waterfront, arguably one of the greatest films ever made, also in the 50s. Shane, hey, Shane, come on. Brandon DeWilde, Alan Ladd. The Thing from Another World changed the way we looked at science fiction. Actually created a science fiction monster and explained a lot of different things. Also, the monster was played by James Arness, who was later Matt Dillon in Gunsmoke. Touch of Evil, also one of the great films of all time. Orson Welles who directed it, Marlene Dietrich, just Charlton Heston. Wells doesn't get that job if Heston doesn't stand up for him. The opening scene, 12, 14 minutes without a cut, starts in Mexico, ends up in San Diego. One of the great opening scenes ever in any film. That's my list of the 50s. You can add to it below. If you like this, please like. If you like this, okay, then please subscribe and share. That would help me a lot. I'm just getting going doing this. You're going to learn a lot about film, and you'll never have to see another bad movie if you listen to me. I'm Gil Whiteley. I'll think to that.